The 1930s witnessed a global political climate charged with tension and unrest. In the aftermath of the Great War, the world was left scarred, both physically and emotionally. The Treaty of Versailles, designed to ensure peace, ironically sowed the seeds of another conflict. It imposed heavy reparations on Germany, a nation already crippled by war, and left them yearning for a resurgence. Meanwhile, in Italy, a charismatic leader named Benito Mussolini rose to power, heralding the era of fascism. He promised stability and strength in a time of uncertainty. His regime, marked by aggressive nationalism and totalitarian rule, resonated with those feeling disillusioned by the aftermath of World War I. Parallelly, Germany saw the rise of Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party. Hitler, fueled by a deep-seated resentment for the Treaty of Versailles and an intense nationalism, sought to restore Germany's honor and place in the world. He remilitarized the Rhineland, defying the treaty and challenging the patience of the world powers. In the East, Japan, inspired by the might of the West, sought to establish its dominance in Asia. Their invasion of Manchuria in 1931 marked the beginning of Japan's aggressive expansionist policy, further adding to the global unrest. As the decade progressed, Hitler's audacity grew. He annexed Austria in 1938 in what he termed the Anschluss, or link-up, but his ambitions didn't stop there. The Sudetenland crisis, involving the German-speaking regions of Czechoslovakia, further escalated tensions. The world watched with bated breath as Hitler continued his aggressive expansion, Mussolini pursued his imperial ambitions, and Japan flexed its military might. The League of Nations, established to maintain world peace, seemed powerless against these rising threats. And so the 1930s, a decade marred by political instability and escalating tensions, came to an end. The world, still recovering from the scars of the First World War, found itself on the precipice of another. As the decade ended, the world stood on the brink of another devastating war. In September 1939, the world was plunged into chaos as World War II began. A conflict that would span 6 years and involve over 30 countries, it marked a dark period in our global history. At the heart of the conflict was Germany, under the leadership of Adolf Hitler and his Nazi Party. Hitler's aggressive foreign policy and expansionist ideology were key factors in the outbreak of war. On the 1st of September 1939, Hitler unleashed his forces on Poland. With a swift and brutal blitzkrieg, or lightning war, Poland fell to the Nazis in less than a month, shocking the world with the ferocity and speed of the German advance. In response to this blatant act of aggression, Britain and France, both allies of Poland, declared war on Germany. They had hoped to avoid another large-scale war, but Hitler's invasion of Poland left them with no choice. The wheels of war were now in motion, and they would not stop until the entire continent was consumed. As the war spread, Germany continued its aggressive campaign, invading Norway and Denmark in April 1940. By May, the Low Countries, Belgium, the Netherlands, and Luxembourg, were also under attack. This was followed by the invasion of France, a major player on the European stage. The speed and effectiveness of the German war machine led to rapid victories, leaving these countries in the hands of the Nazis. The Battle of Britain, fought in the skies over the UK from July to October 1940, marked the first major defeat for Germany in the war. Despite heavy bombardment, Britain's Royal Air Force defended their homeland with a tenacity that earned them global admiration. Yet, the war was far from over. By the end of 1940, much of Western Europe was under Nazi control. This was the grim reality as the world stood on the precipice of a new decade. A decade that would be defined by war, resistance, and the struggle for freedom. The stage was now set for some of the most dramatic and devastating events of the 20th century. In the early 1940s, the tide of war began to shift, with the echoes of the first 2 years of World War II still reverberating. The early 40s saw a dramatic change in the course of the war. Germany, once the predator, became the prey as it committed a strategic error of monumental proportions, the invasion of the Soviet Union. Underestimating the resilience and sheer size of the Soviet forces, the Germans soon found themselves in a quagmire, the likes of which they had not anticipated. Meanwhile, half a world away, the United States had been maintaining a policy of isolationism, steering clear of the war's tumultuous waves. But all that changed on a fateful day in December 1941, when Japanese aircraft swooped down on the American naval base at Pearl Harbor. The surprise attack ignited a flame in the American spirit, thrusting the United States headfirst into the war. Suddenly, the Axis powers found themselves fighting on multiple fronts, their resources stretched thin. It was during these trying times that the war saw some of its most significant turning points. In the east, the Battle of Stalingrad raged on. It was a brutal confrontation, a battle not just for territory, but for the very soul of the Soviet Union. The Red Army emerged victorious, and the German forces began a long and demoralizing retreat. Simultaneously, in the Pacific, the Battle of Midway saw the United States gain a decisive victory. The Japanese, who had been advancing unopposed in the Pacific, suffered a devastating blow, marking a pivotal moment in the war. The final turning point came on a day that would be forever etched in history: D-Day. Thousands of Allied troops stormed the beaches of Normandy, marking the beginning of the end for the Axis powers in Europe. As 1945 dawned, the Axis powers were on the retreat. Their dreams of global domination dashed. They faced the harsh reality of a war that had turned against them. The tide of war had indeed shifted, and the world held its breath, awaiting the conclusion of this global conflict. In the closing months of the war, the true horrors of the conflict were revealed. As the Allies advanced, they uncovered the unimaginable atrocities committed in the Holocaust, a systematic genocide that claimed the lives of 6 million Jews. Simultaneously, the fall of Berlin marked a significant turning point, a symbolic collapse of the Nazi regime. Hitler, the man who had orchestrated this global turmoil, committed suicide in his bunker, leaving his nation in ruins. The war in Europe culminated with the unconditional surrender of Germany, signifying the end of Nazi tyranny. However, the war was far from over in the Pacific. The United States, in a drastic effort to end the war and save lives, dropped atomic bombs on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The devastation compelled Japan to surrender, marking the end of the war. In September 1945, World War II finally came to an end. The world had witnessed the darkest side of humanity, forever changing the course of history.